Do you know what the normal cost of nuvaring is without a prescription, or without being covered by insurance? Ooh. Wow. I'm guessing not a lot of people get it without insurance. Okay, if you guys have been following me on Instagram or Twitter, you know that I have been thinking, pondering, mulling over the concept of birth control for like the past couple weeks-ish. I have a sordid history with birth control, which I think a lot of women can relate to. I think that contraceptives and birth control are a touchy subject, which is why I've really wanted to kind of sit and do some research before I made a full video about it, but I think it's also a very important topic that's not talked about enough. I'm gonna give you my personal experiences with birth control today, go run through all the different ones that I've used, how I felt about them. Spoiler alert, all of them were effective. I've never been pregnant before. But just because you don't get pregnant, that doesn't mean that you love a birth control. It's done its job, but it could do its job poorly. So telling you all of that, let's take it back in time. To early sexually active Arden. This is the time, mom or dad or family members, you can turn off this video so you don't have to hear the rest of this. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay. Here we go, you've been warned. The first form of contraception that I ever used, which is probably the most common form of contraception, is condoms. What? I used condoms because I'm a safe kid, and so that's what I used. And they're also the most readily available thing. You can get condoms anywhere. You can get them at drugstores, you can get them at Planned Parenthood, you can get them at sexual health clinics galore. The NHS has condoms. They're all over the place. They're great. The main drawback from condoms that I've heard from a lot of people is A, it dulls sensation. That's true. They can be a little bit messy, they can be difficult, and sometimes if you're bad at using them, they can break and you can have an unintentional situation that could lead to pregnancy. I would bring condoms around if I was single, just in case I just fell and landed on a dick somewhere, you know? I do understand why people stick with them for the rest of their lives after starting to use them. And my main reason to do that would be because it sort of puts the birth control issue on the dude. And that doesn't happen very often with women. We are given the task of building families and not building families and doing things to our bodies that we wouldn't normally do to prevent pregnancies, like, you know, ingesting a boatload of hormones or changing your body's natural chemistry or shoving stuff up there to try to keep yourself from getting pregnant. So I think that if you can make a dude be the responsible one and be like, hey, did you bring condoms? That's always a good thing. I think that men need to be more involved with preventing pregnancies. And you'll see why I say that later on, because I've got some facts to back my shit up. So first one, condoms, great, did their job. Pills were next. And the first one that I ever went on was Logestrin. I think that's what its name was. I don't even know if it's around anymore. You'll find that there's a funny trend of birth control pills going on the market and then about a year or two later getting pulled for some kind of health problem. So who knows if that pill is still around. But I actually got it from Planned Parenthood here in LA, which is dope. Quick shout out to Planned Parenthood. I was looking up some research on Planned Parenthood, and the crazy thing is there's this huge misnomer about Planned Parenthood that 94% of all of their like money and services go towards abortions. That is the most untrue thing I've ever heard. They actually only use 3% of their services and money towards abortions. The rest of it is basically all just sexual health. So when I say that I got birth control there, from a study that they did in 2013, which is not that long ago, there were 3.6 million services rendered that were contraceptive services or birth control services, 4.5 million sexually transmitted infections or disease screenings and then treatments, and almost 1 million cancer screenings and life-saving screenings like pap smears and mammograms. So that is what Planned Parenthood is all about in my mind. I've never been to a Planned Parenthood where I haven't had a good experience and talked to people who gave a shit about what was going on with my body. And I think part of that is because they want to be there. I don't know. I'm just saying, if you have a little extra cash at the end of the month, a little extra something in your piggy bank, throw it towards Planned Parenthood. I know that I want to give back to Planned Parenthood because I have used their services before, and I understand how important their work that they do is in impoverished areas that don't usually have either sexual education or any kind of sexual health services that can be rendered without large payments on the back end. So just wanted to throw that out there at the beginning of all this. I don't think I could make a video about birth control without talking about Planned Parenthood. So that was the first place I got pills. Those pills made me so angry and so mean and so horrible. And I gained weight and I got acne and all the bad things happened. Granted, I was also 18, so I was changing a lot, my body was changing a lot, and I don't think adding a hormonal birth control helped that. Mine was a low estrogen, hence the reason name, low gestrin. Mine was a low estrogen pill, so it was supposed to just basically theoretically sort of make your body think that it's pregnant, and then it also thickened the mucus layer around my cervix. Yes, honey. Ooh, that's a thing. That is how a lot of birth controls work, is that when that mucus thickens, sperm can no longer swim through and get away with it. So if I had to rate pills for me, I've been on a couple different ones. Logestrin is the one that I remember the most. I did not like pills. I would give pills like a 4 out of 10 because they were not the thing that ever worked for me. They made me feel crazy. And I won't say that that's the only reaction that people ever have. People love birth control pills. It can help lessen your periods. It can actually clear up your skin. The thing about birth control is all of it is so subjective. So when I'm saying all this stuff, just keep that in mind. Next up, I used the sponge. What? Yeah. It's basically the grossest form of birth control ever. It is literally a little kind of donut-shaped sponge that you get in a little package, and when you put it under water and squeeze it, a spermicide comes out. It almost like foams. In fact, it does foam. And then you insert that donut sponge so that it will block sperm from getting up through your cervix and impregnating ya. It's nasty. It is nasty. I used it for a while because I didn't want to use condoms anymore, and birth control was really messing with my body, and so I was just trying to find something that would be non-hormonal but also wouldn't totally ruin my sex life because I've just never been such a fan of condoms. It was really hard to get. That was the first problem. It was like so difficult to find this thing. The biggest thing to me was that this spermicide would make my vagina very irritated. The flora and fauna of my vagina, did not appreciate the spermicide and the chemicals that were contained within this sponge. That was the biggest problem, was just that it was irritating. I couldn't enjoy sex because I would be so raw. I don't think it's very good for the pH balance of your body at all. Some people I'm sure really like it. I wish I hadn't really tampered with it, although I'm glad now because I can give you information about it. But do not recommend. Stay away from the sponge. Leave the sponges in the kitchen, not in your vagina. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Next up, we've got nuvaring. That was my last birth control I ever used. I used it for about 1.5 years. I only stopped using it about 6 months ago, and the reason why I stopped using it was because it's very expensive, and I was in between health insurance, and so it was really tough for me to get just any form of it unless I went to a doctor and like specifically asked for it, and I had to pay the over-the-counter price, which was I think $180 or $280. It was like a pretty crazy price for birth control every month, and I couldn't really justify it. It also would sometimes whack out my periods, like I wouldn't get them, or I would and I'd get them for like 2 weeks, and so I was just a little worried about that. But it did make me sort of dissociate from Will for like the last 3 days of my period. I felt like I didn't like the way Will's pheromones smelled, and I have to like chalk that up to messing with my hormones a little bit. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I love the way Will smells. Like, love it. It's a little creepy. Like, the first thing I do when I see him after a long time is like sniff behind his ears and like sniff right here at his temple and like up here. Like, I just love smelling him. And for some reason, like the last 3 days of my period, I'd be like, no, I don't want you around. It was just weird. That was just a random side effect I thought I'd throw in there. Little freebie there, but odd, very odd. IUDs are another one, and I can't say that I've ever had an IUD, so I don't have personal experience with it, but go watch Meghan Hughes' videos about her IUD, and that'll pretty much tell you how I feel about them as well. I am very nervous about implanting anything in my body that shouldn't be there. There are so many different risks associated with it. It falling out, it causing hormonal imbalances for you, it implanting on your uterine wall. Like, all of that is very scary to me, and enough for me to not want to do it. I understand that it's a viable option that's non-hormonal as well. You can get a copper coil that doesn't have any hormones, but I've heard that your period can be horribly heavy. I had a friend who actually had to take hers out after 6 weeks because she never stopped bleeding. And I think overall the risks associated with all of these things outweigh my need to use them. I would much rather use condoms than have to deal with an IUD. I would much rather use a lot of other forms of birth control than an IUD. They can also be expensive. There are options at Planned Parenthood for you to get an IUD. You can also get them through your health insurance, obviously, but if you're getting them out of pocket, they're pretty expensive. So that's the only thing that I have to say about IUDs. I considered them for a very long time, and just after reading a lot of different forums, I found that you could be dealt any hand when it came to IUDs, and I think that's true of any birth control, and that's why I'm so cautious taking them. The risks sort of outweighed the reward of having like some slammin' sex, and I just decided not to do an IUD. So that's my opinion on IUD. There you go. I sort of felt like when I was taking birth control or trying to use some sort of hormonal birth control, that I was always kind of spinning a roulette wheel and I was just waiting to see what side effects I got. That's just how every single one of my experiences with birth control has been. And I think it's kind of sad. Like, even my nuvaring, which I thought was my thing, it turned on me, it reared its ugly head, and that's not so great, you know? So the 3 other forms of contraceptive or birth control that I can really think of are the pull-out method, which is self-explanatory. If I have to explain the pull-out method to you, don't use it. Abstinence, which is also a form of birth control because you're just not having sex. Some people have very amazing sex fasts where they just don't have sex for a long period of time and they feel like they have regained control in their life, and I think that's amazing. Also, some people are very young and don't want to have sex yet, which I totally understand. And also religious people who don't want to have sex for religious reasons. All of that is understandable, and honestly, you're winning because you don't have to deal with birth control. So solid. A vasectomy is a very I won't say intense surgery because it is like actually an outpatient procedure. You can go and get it done in a day and just leave. There's actually a whole video that Rhett and Link did getting vasectomies, which I'll leave in the description box below as well because it's really funny. They both got their vasectomies done together, best friends, very cute. But obviously vasectomies are something that is usually done a little bit later in life for a man, which is understandable. People want to have kids, so they're worried about messing up any of their, you know, inner bits, which is understandable. But at the same time, you gotta think, women are really screwing up our bodies if we shouldn't have all these hormones running around, you know? This is where my opinion sort of gets in the way, but I do feel like there's a huge gap between the expectations of a woman in birth control and men. In 2017, birth control was a $16.25 billion industry in the US. That's crazy. So that's pills, that's nuvarings, that's the sponge, that's anything that you could get prescribed or buy. That is how large the industry is, okay? And there are 336 million over-the-counter female purchases of birth control in 2016 as well. The CDC did a report on women taking birth control. The percentage of women aged 15 to 44 that were taking birth control pills was 15.9% of Americans. IUDs or implants, 8%. Female sterilization was 14.3%, and male sterilization was 4.5%. So the primary means of birth control for women and men was taking pills or some kind of IUD implant or female sterilization. And that makes sense because there is not a hormonal option or any kind of birth control option for men that is really viable on the market other than vasectomies and condoms or pull-out method or abstinence. Now the crazy thing is, if you take the information that you know about how many sales are made with birth control, it's a $16.25 billion industry in the US, which is crazy. If you take that information and also the information that there's no hormonal options for men, there's no temporary options for birth control or contraception other than condoms for men, that is interesting. There was actually rumors going around for a while about a contraception that was supposed to be coming soon for men called Vasalgel. And this was basically what you could consider a temporary vasectomy that started in India and had already gone through human trials, was successful. It's gone to animal trials in the US. Those started in 2010. The only problem is there's no funding left for it because there's not an industry. Like, there's no money in having a one-time, one-stop shop every couple years birth control option for men. What Vasalgel is a procedure where you just inject a gel into the vas deferens, which is the tube that sperm travels through, and it basically creates a little blockage that stops sperm from getting out. It has to stay behind the lines. And it's basically the same thing as what a vasectomy does. A vasectomy obviously cuts that part or burns that vein so that you no longer have any kind of travel between the two, but it's supposed to be a permanent fix. The thing about Vasalgel that is interesting is that it is temporary. It actually can be flushed out of your system after you're done using it, or if you don't want it to be in there anymore and you want to have kids, you can flush it out of your system and it's gone. It's just a needle going in your ball sack, squirting a little thing in and getting out of there. And how amazing would it be if that were something that were available here, that would be a one-stop shop. You could get it done in less than an hour and you wouldn't have to worry about birth control for the next 5 years or messing with your hormones or any of that. That's what's crazy to me, is that this is something that's not available to us because it's not something that has market value. You can't sell that to someone constantly like you can sell birth control every month to a woman. And that's sort of where I want to leave the question with you. How do you feel about birth control? How do you feel about the contraceptive or birth control method that you're using? Do you love IUDs? Do you love birth control pills? How have they changed your life? If you had the option, would you make your partner use a Vasalgel or ask them to use a Vasalgel? I hope you don't like pin them down and inject them with gels in their ball sack. Please don't do that. If it were an option, do you think your partner would be receptive to it? I feel like in our society, we place a lot of importance on women to be the sole proprietors of the temple of their body. And we don't really pay as much of a mind to men and their potency. My egg was minding its own business before your sperm decided to enjoy the party, you know what I mean? And I just wish that we placed a little bit more importance on male birth control or some form of birth control that wouldn't have to land on the shoulder of women all the time. It's interesting that India has been doing these studies for a while on Vasalgel. If you want to check out their website as well, I'll link it down in the description box. They are also taking donations, which I might donate a little pretty penny over to because I find that a really interesting birth control method, and I think it could also be very interesting for developing nations. So that's part of the reason why I think birth control is really important. I think if you live in a country where birth control is an option or contraceptions are easy to get, just remember that that is not something that's available to everyone all the time, and you are very blessed if you get to use it. I mean, I know that's how I feel. I'm so happy that I found my sexual education online and took it seriously from a young age, and I hope that you guys are doing the same thing. Leave me all of your thoughts, all of your feelings down in the comments down below. Make sure to like this video if you liked it. Also like it because I spent a long ass time on those animations. Like a very long time. Also, everything that I talked about here, you can look up if there's any facts that you are confused about, whether it be the Planned Parenthood abortion facts or anything else I talked about. Just do a quick little Google and you can make sure that I'm saying things correct. And if I did say anything that was incorrect or something that you think I should have said a little differently, you can always leave me a comment as well, and I will appreciate that greatly. I want to end this by saying that birth control is a very personal thing. Birth control is something that I don't take lightly because I do not want to mess with the natural chemistry of my body, but that does not mean that birth control can't be an amazing thing for other people. I think it's very fascinating to hear about what ladies are doing to keep it snatched and prevent little kiddos from running around. I like to know. On that note, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that bell because YouTube fucking sucks and they're just making it like you have to go through an obstacle course to find my videos. So yeah, if you want to click that little bell, it would do me a great service. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you later. Bye!